Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on Proptech in emerging markets, organized by the Africa Proptech Forum. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Simon Ardonso, Head of Consulting and Business Development for JLL in Africa, and I will be moderating this webinar today. I'm joined by 5 panelists from across the world and different emerging markets, whom I'm going to let introduce right now, starting with John Kuruvilla. If you want to start introducing yourself,
Okay.
John, and
Hi,
give a
Simon.
brief overview of yourself and your company.
Yeah. Thank you, Simon. Pleasure to be here. I'm from India. I represent a company called Brigade REIT. We pioneered Proptech in Asia in 2016 when the word itself was not coined. We mentor startups. We've now evaluated 2,800 startups, have mentored 50 startups across different aspects of their life stage, and we basically help startups to scale and grow. We're now moving overseas. We do a lot of work with companies in the Middle East, and pleasure to be here to share my experience from India for you all to benefit from. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, John. Lucas, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Simon. So I'm a CEO and co-founder of Spaceflow, which is a company startup that we have founded in 2016 in Prague, Czech Republic, and we provide all-in-one tenant experience solution for commercial and residential real estate. So we basically help landlords to digitize all tenant-facing operation across the portfolios. So since our solution is pretty scalable, we have clients and partners all over 18 markets, including the UK, US, DACH, Scandinavia, but also CE, Central Eastern Europe, where we started the company. So I'm very happy to compare the different perspectives across the markets and have a nice discussion with you. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Lucas. Yael, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Yael Tamar. I'm the CEO of SolidBlock, CEO and co-founder of SolidBlock. We're a Proptech, Fintech, and blockchain startup with headquarters in the US and a company in Israel. I personally live in Israel, and I cover, in general, a lot of ground in Israel and in the UAE, as well as partnerships all over the region. So I'm here representing the Middle East.
Thank you, Yael. Dr. Roland? I believe you're on mute, Roland.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I think I'm fine now, yeah. Yeah, my name is Roland Igbinoba. I'm founder of Python Housing Company. But over the last 3 to 4 years, I've been more involved in Proptech Nigeria. Proptech Nigeria is a body that is responsible for pushing Proptech in the Nigerian landscape. So basically, we have over about 100 startups, so we're just trying to push and engage traditional real estate players in the market, regulators, policymakers, just to kind of beginning to embrace Proptech in the country. So that's basically what I've been doing over the last 3 years. So Proptech Nigeria, it's an NGO, so to speak, or is a not-for-profit entity, while the company that I work for is Python Housing Company. Yeah.
Thank you, Roland. And finally, joining from Mexico early morning, Andres.
Good morning, Simon, John, Roland, Yael, Lucas. Yes, here is very early in Colombia right now, Simon. And my name is Andres, founder and co-founder of Colombia and Mexico Proptech Association in Latin America. I am a civil engineer, musician, and Proptech entrepreneur. And Simon, right now I am a CEO of Acced. Acced, we are redefining rental housing, combined technology, design, flexibility, and logistics. And it's my pleasure to be with you guys.
Thank you very much, Andres. It's a pleasure to be with all of you guys. And just before we dive into a series of questions regarding the various markets you're operating in, just wanted to give a brief introduction on the PropTech scene in general, and try to give a bit more background on this industry, and putting in the wider context of the real estate industry, which historically, if we look at the past couple of decades, we've seen that the industry has been lacking in terms of R&D investment. Studies in the US found that only 0.4% of revenues were reinvested in R&D, which, if you compare to automobile, for example, it's only 4 times less than such a sector. Generally, what we've seen is that the real estate industry has barely improved its productivity if you look at the past couple of decades, whereas in other sectors we've seen tremendous improvement in productivity. Nevertheless, if we look a bit closer from us and just the past decade, from 2010 up to 2020, there we've seen that the PropTech sector has been catching up, and it has really been booming, with 4 times more startups being created during that period only. So effectively, what we are seeing now is innovations throughout the real estate value chain, whether we look at project planning to construction, lending to the type of ownerships we see in the market, transactions, the way transactions are done, to asset management of all type of properties. And this is just to name few subsectors in the real estate value chain. In terms of the technologies we see typically used in PropTech, we see a lot of artificial intelligence, a lot of big data being used in analytics, blockchain, obviously, software platform, automation, as well as when it comes to construction, new techniques such as precast, offsite, or 3D printing, and also construction materials. What we can see as a whole in the PropTech market is clearly the residential and commercial asset classes make up for the largest share of innovation that has been released recently by startups. And if we look at funding, again, PropTech is being on a catch-up mode, with last year seeing a record in terms of funding. At a global level, we've seen a total of $32 billion of funding going into PropTech, which is ahead of EdTech, for example, sitting at $20 billion, but remains behind HealthTech at $37 billion, and far behind Fintech at $210 billion for last year. If we look at the largest funding rounds for last year only, we've seen that the largest rounds of funding have been happening in the US. For example, they included companies such as Entrata in property management for a bit more than $500 million, Service Titan, which is a software platform for home service trade, with 2 rounds of funding at $500 million and $200 million. We've seen Plume as well in smart home and connected devices at $270 million and $300 million. We've seen Divey as well on the lending side, private lending, as well as rent-to-home schemes. And finally, Blend, which is a digital lending platform for mortgages and consumer banking, with a round of funding at $300 million. So with those large rounds happening in the US, it's no surprise that more than 50% of funding is actually channeled towards US-based startups. But nevertheless, what we're seeing is that emerging markets represent a huge potential for PropTech startups, with, among other advantages and opportunities, First of all, a growing population base, which is already in itself, as of today, sitting at 6 billion people, which make up for 85% of the world population. A strong and still growing urbanization rate, a potential for leapfrogging through rapid adoption of digital solutions, and also limited competition and lower barriers to entries and more developed markets such as US or Europe. So with that being said, let us discuss the specificities of the emerging markets with our panelists coming from Africa, the Middle East, Asia, Eastern Europe, and Latin America. And I would like to start my first question with Roland and Lucas, asking them about the key trends they've seen emerging in their respective region. How would you say the trend you've seen compare with the one that we will see in US or Europe, for example? And do you see any specific asset classes that see more disruptions? Roland, if you want to start with this question.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Simon. I mean, it's important to look at where disruption has been. Really, like I said, I mean, our market it's very nascent. It's still very nebulous. But what we see is that there is a lot of attention in the residential side of things. Okay, so that's where we've seen basically a lot of disruption, with the startups that are looking into that space. And I would say we've made some success. Maybe as we discuss further in the course of the session, I'll give details of what's happening in terms of scalability and funding. But basically, we've seen breakthroughs in the residential space. The commercial section is still a bit difficult to crack, but we've seen people within the residential space of letting, renting, also breaking down an aggregation of properties, but all focus around the residential space. So that's basically what we are seeing in terms of where the disruption is. So if you took Lagos, for example, Lagos is a city that has over 20 million people. And then we have areas, and the people travel from semi-urban area and sub-urban area to the heart of the city. And this travel time could take as well as maybe a total of about 4 or 5 hours. Okay, so but what we have seen with a lot of the Proptech startups is to then take a lot of the very unoccupied houses in the heart of the city due to affordability and break them down into rooms. So people who live far could now stay closer to work, because rather than taking a 4-bedroom apartment, which is expensive, they can actually take a 1-bedroom apartment, okay? Or probably even pay for a period of, say, 6 months or on a monthly basis anyways. And, we've also seen some of the Proptech go at even weekly payment. And that is a huge innovation when you talk about a country like Nigeria, where we are used to paying like 2 years upfront and 1 year upfront. So we've seen disruptions mainly around that space.
Very good. Thank you, Roland. Lucas, do you want to go next on this question?
Yeah, sure. So I think the fundamentals are that, the way people use real estate across both like living and working sectors has changed massively, right, over a period of past 2 years, and this is continuing to be affecting all of us in the current setup and the near future, and we see this is happening actually across all the markets globally. So from our perspective, it's really about the real estate companies. Like many of them are much more ready to embrace the demand of the flexibility coming from the tenants and from people living and working in these buildings. and many of these companies are really not ready at all. What I see is a big difference, for example, comparing some of the real estate owners in markets like UK, US, or Benelux. They are much more ready, that they have their own digital teams or innovation teams, with these technology or innovation managers with really a concrete strategy, and plan how they will digitize all the processes and the life cycle of the portfolio of the tenant journey. And this is something that we are lacking many times, speaking with companies, for example, here in CEE, and I think this really needs to change, because it again starts with the people in these companies, that they need to know what they actually want to achieve with the technologies, right? So the fundament is that there are big changes happening, and not just from the flexibility perspective, but also ESG, and reaching net zero future. But this really differentiates company by company. There are super innovative ones, and then there are the ones that are really lacking behind.
All right, thank you, Lucas. The next question directed to John and Roland again. In general, what stage of development would you say the Proptep ecosystem is at in your region?
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. So I would say it's still very early. If we were to say Proptech 1.0 to Proptech 3.0, I'd probably say we are still in Proptech 1.0. Okay, there is a lot of speak, and the challenge also is there's a lot of conversations in trying to engage the traditional real estate players to adopt Proptech. Okay, so yes, we have information and knowledge around artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, machine learning, and all of those. Okay, we're beginning to use that especially around predictive analytics and also artificial intelligence for rental properties. But I would say it's still very early stages, because a lot of the people who have the resources to scale all of these solutions up, we're still in engagement with them as you speak. But I would say we are making some progress, because two of our Proptech startups, joined MetaProp last year, which we think for us is a big deal. We had, and this is, I think, Split and Estate Intel joined the MetaProp accelerator program last year. I think another Proptech company, Rent Small, also joined the Canada Tech Stars. So we're seeing a lot of interest. We're seeing venture capital come into the space, but we would love for more to happen. We would love for more to happen, really, and that's basically where we are at the moment. So in the nutshell, I would say it's still early stages, but the potentials are humongous. Because day in, these guys are coming up with different solutions. We're having to engage all of the policy makers in the country. Even the regulators are beginning to embrace conversations with all of the industry. So when you begin to have meetings with Securities and Exchange Commission, the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Real Estate Developer Association of Nigeria, that gives us a lot of confidence that we are making progress. But I would say in the nutshell, we're still at early stages. Thank you.
Yep. Yes,
Thank you, Roland.
As far as India is concerned, I think both India and Africa at similar stages in the country's life cycle. Proptech is relatively new even in India. When we started in 2016, we just had 15 startups in the Proptech space. Today, like I said, we've got in excess of 3,000. What's interesting is that we drew a parallel between Fintech, which is the fastest growing vertical globally, and Proptech. It took 20 years for a Fintech startup in India to become a unicorn. Compared to that, the average time taken for startups in the Proptech space to become unicorns is 5 years. And today we have 81 unicorns in India. Just in the last 6 months, we were pleasantly surprised that 3 large PropTech startups became unicorns, and there are 2 more that are filing for IPOs. So in just this 6 months, we'll have 5 PropTech startups becoming unicorns. And that is also representative of the fact that there's a lot of investment money coming into India. Every year, we're getting in excess of $500 million in PropTech, but with a lot of M&A happening, that is swelling. COVID has been a fantastic boon for PropTech in India. While it was a bane for the real estate industry, uh, almost 30% of our startups raised money during COVID times because the real estate fraternity in India realized, and your data showed that real estate globally adopts very little of technology. But during the lockdown, the real estate companies realized they needed technology, and hence COVID became an accelerator par excellence for the PropTech industry in India. So all in all, while we are still early, we believe, and we've been tracking India and the other markets, that we will leapfrog other verticals to very soon be at the top of the pile across all verticals. So great space, great time. Urge startups across Africa and India to actually look at getting into the PropTech space and gain significant returns. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, John. Very exciting. Let's hear about the other markets, if you don't mind. Yael, do you want to go next and tell us about the Middle East?
Sure, I would love to. So I think it's no secret that the Middle East real estate, specifically real estate industry, has experienced an explosive growth. And that's part of the reason why PropTech is so relevant here. And there was another big factor that contributed specifically to PropTech growth over the last 5 years. And that's number one, the Expo in the UAE. Which brought technologies from all over the world, which of course affected PropTech. And the second is the FIFA football championship that is held, I believe, in Qatar this year. So a lot of technologies there have to do with bringing a bunch of people right into one space. So Israel, of course, is a big startup country, right? A startup nation. And even though PropTech arrived here relatively late, we already have several unicorns, such as Vive, which basically creates the home operating system and AI and IoT embedded home materials, which has already had an exit, and it's a PropTech company. So that's a big trend in Israel in general is AI and IoT, those two trends. So of course they are applied to PropTech here. Another thing I wanted to mention, so I mentioned that in Bahrain there is, oh actually I didn't. So Bahrain has been chosen number one country for PropTech in the MENA region. I think they're not including Israel into that, into the MENA region for some reason. So and so there's been a tremendous growth in PropTechs, which I think is in contrast to what I've heard, from the first two speakers. So I don't really know why we're calling this the emerging market, frankly, but that's another story. I think there is a lot to learn from the experience of this region, just in the way that the real estate companies have been applying technology.
Thanks, Yael. Andres, do you want to give us your perspective on Latin America?
Well, frankly, right now are emerging different business models in Latin America where innovation, technology, and teams, because we need to talk about the talent, the people, are disrupting the PropTech industry here in Latin America. First, the iBroker models are growing rapidly. Buy, sell, rent any asset. Reduce the process is one of the main trends here in Latin America. The second one, the iBuyer model, as you know, in the US market, is led by Opendoor and Zillow and others. Also, it's one of the hottest PropTech models here in Latin America. And I've been seeing a lot of startups working in real estate as a service, go from a brick industry to services, So they are providing solutions to many problems that runs into the office space, residential space, and commercial space as well. And I would like to share with you the fourth trend that I've been seeing in the last couple of years here in Latin America is real estate fintech. I would say that 60% of the Proptech startups are focused on transactions right now in Latin America. But in my perspective, Simon, we need more startups that develop digital payment processors, focus on real estate. And the last thing, open finance is coming into Proptech, a solution. We've been seeing a lot of startups looking into the data of the banks to bring different solutions that fintechs here in Latin America are using to develop new services or new capabilities into the customers or users. So yeah, I would say that right now Latin America is hot for venture capital. When you think about the US property market and Europe have more access to venture capital, but Latin or Latin America is one fire right now because we are 600 million people. We are the half of China, and the desire for investor to basically come into Latin America in technology sector is huge.
Thank you, Andres, for sharing. And finally, Lucas, do you want to share about Eastern Europe?
So maybe just a briefly. Unfortunately, no unicorn, Proptech unicorn yet here, but I think it's coming soon.
Not yet.
Not yet. What I see, and it includes us, Spaceflow, like many of Proptech companies are actually building the product here, but they're actually working and offering in many markets across Europe or overseas, because the market itself is not that big, right? So if you want to serve within the office or residential, for example, the build to rent concept here is still being developed, so it's still very early stage. So for us as a tenant experience solution, we rely much more on the markets like DACH region or Benelux, Nordics, where this segment is much more progressed. What we see is that there is bigger demand for Proptech solutions focused on the smart building concept rather than having a serviced space or boosting the tenant experience with apps or platforms. It's really about providing smart access or parking solutions to the buildings. This is something very, very popular here, or many real estate owners are asking for that, how to provide an efficient solution for the building or for the portfolio for these use cases. Then I would say touchless experience as a whole topic, digital maintenance, and then now more also the ESG, like energy efficiency, but this is really different company by company. Some of them are trying to be really on the forefront. Many of them are still not doing anything at all yet.
Thank you, Lucas. Let's stay one more minute with you. Do you see a particular country in Eastern Europe that is taking the leadership in the PropTech sector? You mentioned obviously your own country, Czech Republic. Mm-hmm. Is it the leading country, or are you competing, I don't know, with Poland? Or
I would say for the size of our country, like 10 million people, there is actually quite a lot. And for example, in just this pretty small market, we have like 3 types of solution focused on having a building app, which I think is a lot for such a small market. So of course, most of them are partnering with landlords internationally. But I think like Poland is also very big market in terms of the size, and also now companies in there. I think I've read like about Bulgaria that they have already like 200 PropTech companies, which I think is a lot. So it's definitely developing also pretty fast. I would say yes, like slower than than in the other European regions. But like I said, it's also thanks to the fact that there is not so many buildings like you can find also in the other bigger markets than here. So it's more as a tech excellence hub, which serves greatly for building the best product that you can offer internationally.
Yes, it remains very much a factor of the local demand in each country. Yeah, you started to touch base on this point earlier. Do you want to maybe elaborate on the leading countries in the Middle East on the Proptech front?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about the trends, because the countries, well, I guess I will mention a few more countries. Saudi Arabia is actually going, I think it's going to be the definite leader, maybe outside of Israel in the region. I think that Saudi Arabia is trying to really move into tech and a little bit out of kind of oil dependency. And of course, real estate is big, but not only that, there is a huge shortage of real estate in the market. So they've been trying to really use AI in specifically urban planning and development. So they created a government initiative called NEOM project that will open its first phase in 2025. It's a $500 billion project, which is basically supposed to just redefine totally the way they do urban planning. And that's because they have a dire shortage. And I think the same problem is now being seen in many other emerging markets, right? As people are moving out of the rural areas and into the urban areas, specifically in the emerging markets. So the same type of initiatives you're also going to see in Egypt and in Jordan. So I already mentioned Qatar. And basically, the FIFA World Cup is fueling a lot of the tech, because you need to, again, jam pack a lot of people into the same space. Also, you need to plan for that, and you need to make sure that they can get to where they need to go, right, during the World Cup. Another thing is basically COVID, right? So everything that has to do with climate, right, and kind of ESG. Has been a trend, specifically in Israel. And we've seen a lot of investors, just because in general in Israel, we see a lot of investment in the ESG sector. So it did not avoid the Proptech. And the second thing is, as we are heading towards kind of a more global cool down and a recession type environment, a lot of investors are focused on risk averse investments, right? So, and actually Proptech is kind of viewed in that category, right? Because the real estate market itself is stable, and that's the market that the Proptech industry is catering, right? So and so we kind of see that we kind of see the same type of investors. And funny thing about the impact and real estate and Proptech is kind of, we do see a lot of investors that invest in both. And I guess the final point is that in the UAE, we see a lot of fractional investment technology coming out, and also blockchain technology. The government is running its title registry on the blockchain, and they're just basically very blockchain focused in the Proptech and outside of Proptech. I think that's enough. Thanks.
Very interesting. Thanks a lot, Yael. Let's stay with you for maybe one more minute. And let's have a look at the specific innovations in the Proptech industry. Do you see in the Middle East specific products being launched that are overtaking some market segments already? I'm thinking, a mortgage-based Proptech app. You mentioned the transaction softwares. Do you see specific products that are really starting to gain significant market shares?
So actually, I see that kind of outside of the emerging markets. A lot of fintech, and I was actually really surprised to hear that in the Latam market, the kind of fintech and proptech is merging already. I think in Africa probably I would like to also kind of ask about the African market. That probably is the biggest trend. In the Middle East, we're now receiving, we're a little bit delayed. Well, all of us, I guess, here in the emerging markets, except the markets that are leapfrogging. Again, I would be interested what's happening in Africa. But in the Middle East, we're getting these technologies much later, than you were seeing them in America or in more developed markets. And what we see in the developed markets is the kind of the emergence of buy now, pay later and open banking, as I heard one of the speakers mention. And you see now how they are prevailing in real estate, because real estate is really one product that everybody wants to buy, right? Whether they do get to buy or whether they don't. So then we have a fractional ownership that really enables everybody to buy. And we, Solidblock, are part of this fractional ownership movement, which enables everybody to participate in real estate. And now you can use more of a financial product that you will leverage to get loans. So instead of a traditional model, when you have to buy a home, and in the emerging markets, frequently in the cities, you see the prices of homes increase so much that the residents can buy them. And that's why sometimes you see ghost cities. Literally, foreigners will go and buy all the homes in the city, right? And that's why a lot of the, some countries in Asia, for example, have a rule, have laws against foreign ownership of 100% of an asset. Because you just, foreigners come in, swoop because it's emerging and it's growing. So we see this trend of fractional ownership that enables people to participate in the growth of the real estate market in their region, right? Because all of us here from the emerging markets are seeing the growth, which is much higher than in the developed world. So naturally, we see payment solutions being used for real estate, like buy now, pay later, like Klarna, for example, or Stripe. They have solutions now for real estate. Now, this is a great opportunity to use in the emerging markets. So for anybody listening who's in that space.
Thank you, Yael. And with regards to Africa, so unfortunately, Roland's connection was not stable, so he has dropped off. But hopefully, we'll be able to connect again with us soon, and we will ask him for his perspectives. But in the interim, John, would you like to share your experience regarding the Indian market in that regard?
Yeah. So, thanks, Simon. Like Africa, India has a very young population. The median age in Africa is about 20. The median age in India is about 27. And the millennials are in a hurry. They want everything yesterday. And we're seeing a lot of movement of Proptech in 6 buckets. And we've seen this over the past 6 years. So it's no longer a fad. We know it's settled in. The largest bucket is sustainability. And that means you're talking of water management, you're talking of climate action, you're talking of waste management, you're talking of sewage treatment. 33% of startups in India in the PropTech space are in the sustainability space. The second bucket we're looking at is materials. C&D waste, plastic waste, constructing of roads, precast roads, a lot happening in the material space. We're looking at, glass facade generating electricity. So a lot of it happening in that. The third we're looking at is automation and robotics. A lot of development happening in that space. The fourth is construction tech, sensors, IoT, legal tech. We put everything, snagging, site management. We're seeing a lot of that happening in construction tech. Analytics has suddenly caught people's fancies. Real estate globally across the world never took data, generated insights for development. Today, we're seeing a lot of companies. In fact, 2 of our companies have got acquired by a much larger player in just 3 years of they coming to the program. We're looking at a lot of, Yael talked about fintech, and I'm looking at fintech and Web 3.0, tokenization, fractionalization, metaverse, a lot of that happening in India. But the challenge with Web 3.0 is the fact that government regulations are still, we were advising companies in the Middle East as late as 2 weeks back. And regulations are a step behind the energy of startups in Web 3.0. So we're looking at a lot of development in this space. In fact, Larry Fink, the chairman of BlackRock, has said that the next 1,000 unicorns across the world are going to be those dealing with sustainability. Uh, you know, education, health tech, fintech, all are good to have. But if there's no planet, what use is any technology? And we believe very, very strongly at Brigade G that technology is going to be what it takes to save the planet. And that's why sustainability is the largest bucket. And I assume it'll be the same for Middle East, Africa, India, Southeast Asia. And we're seeing that across these markets now, including the US.
Very true. Very true. Thanks, John. Perhaps we can extend this question to Andres and get your perspective from Latin America, Andres.
Thank you, Simon, for the question. I would like to share with you guys that in Latin America, in terms of disruption or innovation, I would like to talk the talent, because we can build startups or we can't build unicorns without talent, right? So the power of compounding talent right now is in Latin America is one of the factors that contributing to Latin's rise, right? So we've been seeing the last 3 years that combined with a novel share vision, with the flywheel become unstoppable for the people that is working right now in startups. So talent is important. Education for the corporate real estate is other. Uh, I think is disruption right now. We need educate the corporate real estate because startups need to work with corporates, with other traditional real estate companies, and we need to learn from both sides, right, Simon? So we need to understand how corporate think, and corporate need to understand how the speed is in the NDA of startups. So I think we have to focus on education in our countries, in Latin America, in Mexico, in Colombia, in Chile, in Brazil, because it's not just like we have a platform or we have this technology or whatever. We need to understand that we need to have an inclusive platforms. We need to inclusive uh, uh, digital digital inclusion between all the stakeholders in the industry. It's not just for the startups. We need to understand that we need to educate our users, our customers. I've been seeing a lot of startups that, hey, I have virtual reality. Okay, but maybe a guy that's 65 years old don't want to use your virtual reality. Maybe you need to help them to understand how they can use the technology for benefits to buy a home or whatever. So I think this is the disruption. We need to main focus on education. We need to main focus on help people to understand how technology works. Technology is basically enable for to help process to reduce barriers into the buy a home or whatever. But we need to is my perspective, Simon, that in Latin America we are focused on create communities, learn from the corporate real estate, and corporate real estate need to understand how startups works and how startups are help the customers and users.
Thank you very much, Andres. I see that Roland was able to join us back. Welcome back, Roland. Can you hear us? No, actually, is frozen. So we'll stay with you for a minute more, Andres, with the next question. How do you think how quickly PropTech startup will replace traditional real estate players in LATAM? Do you see that coming anytime soon? Do you think it's more of a long-term game? What's your take on this? What's your forecast?
I don't know if Jael and John and Lucas are with me, but traditional brokerage or in real estate think like, oh, this is a startup. They are going to kill us or something like that. But in my different opportunities that I've been with the whole industry, I always talk about we need to work together, to grow together, to learn together. And that's when people understand that it's not like we want to kill Lucas. No, we can work together, Lucas. We can learn from each other because Lucas maybe have data from the past 10 years, but maybe I'm in a startup. I need to understand the market, and maybe Lucas have a sheet in their computer, but Lucas don't know how to use that data. Maybe my startup know how we can improve that data, right? So this is the examples that we bring into the table, because for the traditional real estate market, for brokerage, for developers, this is very confused. This is scary for many companies here in Latin America. When you see a startup that rise $100 million or more, like Quinto Andar, this is one of the unicorns here in Brazil. So when the real estate see this is what's going on here right now, like. But my message for the real estate industry here in Latin America is let's work together. Let's bring every what you can bring into a table, and let's learn. Let's learn. Let's push. Let's grow together.
It's more of a collaborative approach between the two. Thanks, Andres. And look at what's your take on this in the context of Central and Eastern Europe.
I think Andre put it perfectly. I see exactly the same pattern. Since starting this company, there has been so much pushback from a lot of real estate companies that they were really resistant, or they were scared of that this transformation, digital transformation, is something that can actually be a threat for them. But the opposite is true, right? Like, and now when the world is changing, there are so many new these trends, like the rise of flexibility, ESG, the hybrid working. The technology is enabler. So I see there are two important things to address this. One, like I mentioned in the beginning, the real estate companies need to hire and onboard more of a innovation strategies or innovation roles. Digital managers, they will be actually working on these programs in these companies to help to better adapt to technologies. And second, of course, there's the role of Proptechs to really educate and then also trying to understand as much as possible the needs and pains of the real estate companies, and have also ideally implemented also customer success management or team that really helps the real estate owners to go through the transformation, because it won't happen from day or it will happen fast. It takes time, this process. We know it. And yes, I was also in the when we started company space, we were really we see everything so fast, and yes, it is fast, but still innovation takes time, and this is something that people need to understand, and the real estate owners need to be ready for the process. And the sooner you start, the better you will have a position for a long term, right?
Thank you, Lucas. So collaboration and a bit of a learning curve for everybody. So more of a long-term process, in your opinion. Yeah, you wanted to touch base on this point and give us your perspective.
Sure. I look at it a little bit differently, actually, also from experience as being a prop tech startup. Yes, on the one hand, the real estate industry is a dinosaur. But on the other hand, the newcomers and kind of the younger owners of real estate companies look at the technology as a way to differentiate. And in fact, I wouldn't say PropTech will overtake real estate. That definitely will not happen. But actually, the real estate companies will become fintech companies, PropTech companies, construction, maybe you also start producing their own materials, and you see this all the time. In fact, outside of Proptech, every single tech giant out there is doing payments. So they really are trying to become their own finance solution, because that's the way to control also people's wallets. And so my industry, tokenization of real estate, is also kind of directed toward owning real estate from your wallet, paying, getting loans when collateralizing instead of real estate, you collateralize tokens. So it's related to that. But we personally experienced a lot of the requests to buy Solid Block. We're definitely not at the stage where we would sell the company, but just the interest is not only in using the solution or even on a white label format. They want to own the solution, all right, and build on top of it. So that's really, really interesting. And I think that a lot of real estate companies are now diversifying in private equity, which is something that you haven't seen before, right? And you don't, and also and there is another really good synergy between private equity and real estate, and you see that in family offices. Because family offices traditionally, their base is always real estate. You don't necessarily see this in a VC, right? Like a VC is not going to have a Nostro fund or something invested in real estate, but a family office will have a big base in real estate. And then they started venturing out in PE, specifically in the Middle East, and in the UAE specifically. Family offices are all venturing out in PE and looking at Proptech. We got a lot of phone calls. Every week we have a reach out from a family office that wants to invest in this technology and eventually maybe even buy this technology, own this technology. They all want to become tech companies, right? The newest kind of breed of real estate developers. So I think it's super, super interesting, and we are unique in that. The real estate and the Proptech industry is unique because real estate is such a base asset.
It's really fascinating. Thanks, Yael, for sharing. John, I wanted to come back to you regarding India, and you've mentioned in India there is already 3 unicorn in the Proptech sector. If we take a threshold of let's say $100 million valuation, how many Proptech startup do you see in that bracket? And generally, what's your opinion in terms of the easiness to scale up in Proptech in a context of a market like India?
Okay, so it is estimated that the real estate size of the real estate market in India is going to touch $1 trillion in the next 10 years. It currently contributes to almost 13% of India's GDP. So the market is huge. Like you said, it's a highly inefficient market. Yael mentioned the fact that many second generation real estate developers, kids who've studied overseas have come in, they understand technology. So what's encouraging, Simon, is that we're seeing many chief innovation officer positions in the real estate industry in India. So from the demand side for Proptech, that is mushrooming and growing almost 2-3 times year on year. There are, like I said, about 3,000 startups in the Proptech space in India from almost nil 5 years back. So you're seeing compounded growth. There's also investment of $500 million every year for the last 5 years. So if you look at startups in the $100 million, could be at least 100, 150 startups in that space. And every 3 years, and because of a desire for many investors to move out of China and invest money in markets like India, there is a lot of capital chasing extremely good talent and extremely good solutions. Now, the interesting thing about Proptech is it can do 2 things for a real estate company. It can either save you money or it can help you make money. And most of the startups that we've seen are in the enterprise space. So valuations of enterprise companies are slower. But with fintech coming in, blockchain, metaverse, fraction ownership, we're now seeing the emergence of a lot of large market capped companies emerging every 2 years. So the great market to be in. There's an interesting parallel between the three countries here, between LATAM, Africa, and India. If you take at LATAM's population, I think Andre mentioned, it's about 675 million people. Africa is about 1.2 billion people. India is 1.35 billion people. And there is the problem in a country like India, you don't have enough land mass to accommodate these people. And across the world, whether it's Israel, whether it's Middle East, whether it's Africa, LATAM, or India, there's a migration of population to smaller pockets of land. And that lays a lot of stress on the quality of life in those large migration attractive places. So countries, states, cities don't have a choice but to adopt technology. And you don't, I mean, no, somebody's talking of going to Mars. If you don't handle our country, our planet well, Mars is going to be as much a mess. And I believe that technology only solution for many of them. Today, just today we got applications open for cohort 12. Today we found a company which is actually throwing sensors into concrete blocks. So for the life of the building, we can actually measure the resilience, the strength of pillars in buildings. Couldn't even think of it 3 years back. We met a company from the Netherlands, which is actually creating solar facades. You could hear of solar panels on rooftop of buildings. Now he's going to actually generate energy from the facades of buildings. There's phenomenal technology, and like I tell investors in India, 1.3 billion population is actually 1.3 billion opportunities for Proptech to address in this country. So I think great time for all countries who are represented here, especially the emerging markets.
Thank you, John, and that's very impressive numbers that you're sharing with us on India. Andres, interested to hear about you and Latin America, if you want to share with us.
We have a massive unserved market right now. Simon, Jael, Lucas, and John. Brazil and Mexico are on track to overtake the largest economies in Europe in terms of GDP, just Brazil and Mexico, over the next decade. While mobile penetration in LATAM has been incredible, far-reaching, there still aren't many at-scale tech companies in the region. That's quite different from China, India, and Europe, where you'll find countless competing products and services. And from my founder perspective, the competitive environment in LATAM presents incredible opportunities to create a 10x better solutions. Lack of capital and lack of investment infrastructure in areas such as financial system have created an environment where consumers are able to adopt superior services at rapid rate. So I think when you think in just Mexico and Brazil and the whole region, we have been seeing in the couple of months that when we grow the infrastructure in IT and Wi-Fi and internet in the whole regions in Latin America, the startups see an opportunity in the next years to create services because as I mentioned before, we have the lack of the infrastructure right now of internet. So we believe that in terms of the region, the opportunities from the region are 10x opportunity for everyone here.
Amazing. Thanks, Andres. I see that we almost reaching the hour, but if that's all right with all panelists, I suggest we extend a little bit our discussion.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on maybe to a very important point, which is funding. Let's discuss and touch base on the ease of getting funded in new regions. How easy would you say it is to get funded in your region, and what is the availability of capital, particularly at seed stage, that you're seeing? Maybe we can start with John on this point.
Sure. So, Simon, as is true with any other vertical, good money chases great ideas and execution. There are a dime a dozen ideas, I'm sure, in every country that's represented here, but many of these ideas falter at the altar of execution. So there is enough good money chasing great founders and startups solving pressing problems. Having said that, at the early stage, there is some amount of uncertainty. So what we have done at Brigade Reap is actually set up a seed stage syndicate fund. And what's interesting, and I'm sure there's a lesson for LATAM and Africa, is many of the real estate developers who are customers today are actually investing in the startups through the fund that we've set up because they want to look at an alternate investment strategy. And PropTech is providing a very, very good exit plans for them. Many of the large startups, which are unicorns, today they themselves are acquiring startups. And there's some amount of, and it's very, very, interesting. It takes years for a sector to consolidate. We are seeing M&A in just 4 to 5 years of PropTech as a category coming into India. Very, very healthy signs. So there is a lot of good money chasing extremely good talent, chasing extremely good startups, solving pressing problems in our country. And I'm sure it's the same in Israel, Middle East, LATAM, Africa, and Europe.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Lucas, do you want to share about this point as well, and perhaps Yael afterwards?
I would say in general here in C, there are quite many like seed and actually even pre-seed Series A funds. So, if you have a great product idea, the funding in the early stage is not a problem. What we don't have here is really the PropTech oriented funds that would be specifically helping you, growing with an ecosystem of other solutions here. So this is where you need to look for funds in UK or Nordics market or DACH region, but not here. Unfortunately, not yet. So there is still great opportunity. But I also agree with Yael on the fact that for PropTech companies, there is a huge opportunity to partner with real estate companies directly, and that's also the experience we are seeing, that we get many opportunities to get an investment from the real estate companies directly, and I think that's really typical for this space. And then it really doesn't matter wherever you are in the world, but there are everywhere are real estate companies that are actually becoming tech companies at the moment. And that's a great opportunity for boosting the growth of your company and have a strong partner on board.
Right.
Very good. Yeah.
So let's kind of touch base of a few countries here, but we're experiencing similar trends to the other regions. So in Israel, the market has exploded in the PropTech investment market. I think here we have pretty much every Western fund is present in Israel, so that helps. And they are looking at PropTech. So, but just as a metric, we had 37 construction tech. There wasn't even PropTech back then. 37 companies in 2016. Now we have over 250 startups in the space. So that's an increase of 700%. And in terms of investments, before 2015, there was only 30 million invested in the space. And now additional 440 million was invested between the years of 2015 and 2020. So that's a rise of over 1,000%, 1,400%. And in 2021, over 530 million was invested, right? Now, a big chunk of it actually went to the unicorns, as I mentioned. And we've got over 400 million in investment alone, just that startup. So that, take the 450 or 540. And then Venn is also another urban neighborhood development platform. which suffered a lot during COVID, but I think they're still doing okay now. And they got 100 million. Now in Dubai, a big company for brokers, I believe, called Property Finder, got $500 million, right? And sorry, that's their value. I think $500 million in value. And then a company company called Emerging Markets Property Group, EMPG, 279 million in value. So you see kind of the growth of these companies, which is very encouraging. And in terms of the investment trend, as I mentioned, family office fueled a huge investment trend in the region, just because in general, family offices contribute like a huge amount of GDP in these countries, these traditional Middle Eastern countries, not in Israel, but I think in more of the outside of Israel, MENA region, they can contribute to 50-60% of the country's GDP. So it's as you can see now that they're venturing into private equity, it's a great opportunity for Proptech companies, not only within the region. They're looking everywhere. So if you're a Proptech startup, start exploring the local family offices in Bahrain, in the UAE, and in Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. I think that there could be a really good match.
Thank you. Yeah, very impressive growth in the funding in the Middle East, indeed. Roland, you're back. We're glad to see you back with us. I want to come back to you, Roland, and ask your perspective about innovation in Africa. Do you see any specific innovation overtaking some of the market segments in Africa and Nigeria?
Oh, sure. I mean, I was very interested to hear what's happening in the Middle East, in Israel, in India, you know, and Lucas's region. I mean, it appears that we haven't seen that much traction in Africa, really, in terms of funding, okay? But let me deal with the innovation part of things, first of all. I think all over Africa, right? Lagos, Kenya, Ghana, Morocco, you know, those regions. I mean, for like the countries like Morocco, they've gained some certain level of traction for Proptech. But when you look at East and West Africa, and then I could add Southern Africa to that mix, you know, we're not seeing the kind of things I'm hearing from John, Tama, Andrea, and Lucas. It's not what's happening here. Okay, so on the part of innovation, there are a lot of startups who are innovating. So, for example, I know of a startup, House Africa, who's now helping developers to build, who is now helping developers to kind of itemize land portion, so that when you buy land from a developer, even before the completion of that development, you can actually, through their technology, see what's happening on your property, right? This guy started out with blockchain, but of course they had a problem having blockchain for properties, because when you want to blockchain property, the root of title is a major issue. And working with governments, and this is what I was saying earlier on, you know, working with governments, and governments in the region are not opening their registry up for startups to be able to then blockchain properties. So that then becomes a problem. And what did House Africa do? They pivoted into now helping developers to create that blockchain for their own new development. So again, that's to buttress the point of innovation. We have Estate Intel, who's doing massively well in terms of information, real estate information, you know, with their app. So you have a lot of innovation across the region. What you don't find is the scale up of those innovations. And that's why, you know, it will be very interesting to learn what's happening in, you know, in the Middle East, you know, in India, just to understand how these startups have scaled up. So on one hand, you have a lot of innovation, you know, going on. You have a lot of Proptech startups now. You know, I'm focusing on Proptech startups. When you talk about fintech, we've seen fintechs, unicorn fintech out of Africa. Okay, in Nigeria, we have about 2 or 3, you know, but that's fintech. Okay, now it is helping Proptech. That ability to see a fintech out of Nigeria is helping people to look at the Proptech space. But we still don't have the kind of money flows. I mean, it's interesting, John mentioned that in 6 months, you had over 5 unicorns out of India. We are not having that, and these unicorns are in Proptech. So we are not getting that traction yet in most parts of Africa. And I think this is where we really need to work, where collaboration needs to happen. This is where we need to ask the questions about partnership. How is it done in Israel? How is it done in India? And is there some partnership that can happen? And I think what API is doing, this is very good. That will then help us to move beyond having these conversations and then to say, how can we begin to pilot? I think that's what Africa needs. If you jump on the plane and get into Lagos today, I can give you 20, 30 innovations that will blow your mind. But we're still trying to crack, that genes of having traditional real estate players who I would say have the resources for scale up. And that's where that partnership needs to happen.
So Roland, I have a different proposition. Why don't you jump on the plane and come to Israel and bring with you I'm serious, bring with you your government leaders. And then I'll help you organize some meetings with, number one, the Innovation Authority, and to learn how they support startups. And both, number one, they support startups with grants. And then recently they've entered Proptech. Number two, they give tax credits to foreign companies that come to Israel, specifically, tech companies, large tech companies. And number three, they give sometimes co-investment opportunities with foreign VC funds. So there is a formula that we share with other countries. Korea has implemented it, and Japan. So happy to do something.
Great! Great! Yeah, I mean, we'll take this up offline. I mean, this is kind of engagements that we want to look at. Really, thank you so much. We'll take this offline. I'm happy to do that. Yes, Simon, over to you.
Very good, very good. I see a bit of deal making in the webinar. That's great. Love that. Looking more specifically at the sources of funds of funding for a Proptech startup, do you see any specific VCs focusing on Proptech in your region, and in general, do you see the money coming in from local funds, more regional fund, or global funding? And maybe I will extend as well the question to impact funding and development finance institutions that we typically see in emerging markets, and I think particularly in Africa. So who do you see investing into the Proptech ecosystem?
Okay, so interestingly, we've had a couple of international VCs looking at the market. Typically, these guys are looking at pre-seed series. I think basically what we've had out of the region are basically pre-seed with 1 or 2 seed funding. So right now, I think a lot of local investors are beginning to buy into Proptech. Okay. But again, we're in the period where it's almost like a proof of concept. Where is the revenue? How can we scale this? So if I look at the region, what we have seen is a lot of local VCs, and we're doing a lot of that encouragement to get local VCs up to put more money. So what we are finding is some $50,000, $100,000. And recently, one of the startup Split raised about $600,000. Which was also pre-seed. So we are getting traction with a lot of, it's a mix of local and international VCs. But I guess like in every phase of the market, what we are finding is that the international VCs are more like, if this is really good, why aren't we seeing the local guys put in the money? And so from the conversations that we've had, those are the kind of things that we're finding. And so we're really trying to encourage a lot of the local investors, to put money, in all of this Proptech, because when you begin to do that, the international VCs can then help rather in scaling up. So that's what I've seen across the region where Proptech is being pushed really. And so we are hoping, I mean, we're now this within, we're just 4 months into 2022. We've seen about 4 startups received anywhere from about 200,000 to as high as 600,000 in terms of pre-seed. And majority of these are local VCs. And well, these local VCs, I wouldn't say they are structured as local VCs. From the engagements that I have and the discussions that I've had, they are traditional real estate players who are looking to help the Proptech startups to scale up. So these are not like VC firms built at VCs, but real estate players who have seen that this solution can help me in my business. And so they try to help to provide some sort of innovation and incubation for that startup. So that's what we are seeing. And we think it's a good trend. We just need some 2-3 more successes for this to happen. And that's also to the point that Yale has mentioned in terms of how can government help, what kind of tax credit or subsidies or policies can help, these budding entrepreneurs. And I'm sure India has done the same thing. We've also seen the same thing in Malaysia as well, where government is helping the startups, the tech startups, to really scale and even provide some level of funding. So that's the kind of conversations we need to be having more and more in Africa. I've not seen that yet, apart from Egypt and maybe Morocco. I've not seen that happening, in most parts of the region. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Roland, for sharing. John, do you want to?
Can I just? Yeah, I just want to
comment?
So Roland, just learning from India, I would strongly urge private companies, startups to actually solve problems and build businesses without government intervention. Government will back great initiatives, but if you wait for government to act, you'll be waiting forever. And I have offered this on earlier forums. Brigade Reap is happy to advise you guys on how to set up an incubator and Acced program, because when you create a walled garden, you curate startups and you show a high success rate, everybody will chase startups in that market. And I believe Africa is maybe 2 years behind where we were, and you will leapfrog, and Proptech will become a very, very strong investable category in the next 2 to 3 years. So happy to help. I've offered this in past forums.
Okay, John, that's another deal making. I mean, it's my day today. I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take this forward. Yeah.
Thank Janet. Do you want to comment on the source of funds before we wrap up and move on with a few questions from the audience?
Asking me or?
Yeah. On the source of funds.
So like I
said, is it more global, local?
No, venture capital, the model is very clear. India will follow what works in other parts of the world. However, Proptech, because there was an Acced program like Brigade Reap, it was a concerted effort by one of India's largest real estate development companies, who poured in money and created this entire network and ecosystem. It started with local real estate development firms putting in money, and now you have VCs coming in. It'll never start with VCs coming in putting in money. Like Roland said, even in Nigeria, it'll be the family offices, it'll be real estate companies diverting money to invest in Proptech, because they will get the early bird gets the worm. You'll get higher returns there. Once you've got that, I mean, it's now 2.5, 3 years of us having started investing. Now large VCs have seen that there is a huge amount of money to be made in this space, and they're coming in. So VCs will follow smaller investors, traditional real estate companies putting in money, and I'm sure this will be the same in Andre's countries. And we're seeing this trend in different parts of the world. So I think good money will chase. It'll come from family offices and real estate developers, and then the larger VCs will come in.
Thank you very much, John. And as we're running out of time, I just wanted to take a few questions from the audience, starting with a question from Carlos. Carlos is asking, what would you consider to be the qualifications from new members of an official country's Proptech association? Any lessons related to that? Any lessons learned in this regard? Maybe that's for you, Andres.
Thank you, Simon. Hi to my friend Carlos Roseo in Mexico. In my vision, when we start building Colombia Proptech Association and helping other communities the around the region, was one ecosystem. We need to create an ecosystem in our countries. We need to collaborate with the whole stakeholders. Second, we need to bring into the table education, as I mentioned before. And third, we need to create a sandbox. If we don't work with regulators in our countries, it will stop the innovation in our countries. And the second purpose, when we start thinking about to create an ecosystem here in Colombia and Mexico and Argentina and Brazil, Chile and Peru, we start thinking in growth economy. We need to understand that Latin America and other regions and other markets need to understand that this is all about growth in economy, create new employees, create new environment to build together. That's the purpose that we believe that enhance the whole PropTech ecosystem here in Latin America is what we believe in, and the three verticals are so important because that allow us to work together and because one of the problems in Latin America is that we believe in the past, but we don't believe in the present and in the future that is exciting for startups, for corporates, and the whole industry.
Thank you, Andres. And I will take the one last question to before concluding. A question from Scene. How do you think PropTech ecosystem in emerging/complex markets can work together in terms of info sharing, idea creation, and helping to promote and meet ESG goals, specifically social, which is an urgent matter in our markets? Anyone would like to answer this question?
So I can take a stab at it. I'll give you my perspective. Sham, very interesting question. You know, instead of every country trying to start from ground zero, take the learnings from other countries, because the problems in LATAM, Mexico, Nigeria, Middle East, any part of the world in the construction real estate space is similar. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, you know, it may be a good idea. And I'm learning phenomenally well from what's happening in the Middle East. They're calling for the best startups in the world, the best startup minds of the world to come into their market. They're giving the base to actually make their solutions customized to solving problems in that market. So I think collaboration at a country level, at a startup level with the local ecosystem is a great way to begin this journey. And like I said, Simon, happy to share the Brigade Reap journey and also share our startups who can actually solve problems in Andre's part of the world, in Yael's part of the world, in Ronald's part of the world, in Lucas's part of the world. So collaboration, same problem.
Thank you, John. And that will be the concluding note for today. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar today at Africa PropTech Forum. A big thank you to all our panelists, John, Andres, Roland, Yael, and Lucas. Thanks a lot for your time and your great insights today. It was really great to be with you all today. Enjoy the rest of your day or night, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.